Something unique about this second word of Jesus from the cross is that it happens within a conversation. This is the only one of the traditional 7 last words of Jesus in which we hear someone saying something to Jesus and Jesus responding. Jesus' word comes in response to the sincere plea of the one whom Christian tradition has come to know as the good thief. The good thief is a sinner. He is a sinner who knows who he is. He knows what he has done wrong, how far he has fallen. He sees that he may deserve to be raised up on the hard wood of a cross, condemned, convicted, and punished. Yet he cries out to Jesus, "Remember me, make a place for me with God." And Jesus answers him at once. Jesus has no judgment. He doesn't say, "You wretched sinner." He doesn't preach or instruct or demand a statement of faith. The broken sinner asks to be brought into God's fold, and Jesus says yes, immediately. What is especially lovely about the conversation between these 2 men hanging on their crosses is the kindness they show to one another. Their exchange happens in the context of unimaginable cruelty, the cruelty of crucifixion. And in that moment of sorrow and suffering, the 2 men, by their words to one another, create an alternative vision from that which is happening to them. Their words help them to see themselves for who they really are, and not as the situation is trying to define them. Jesus has been stripped naked, spat upon, mocked. His hands and his feet have been pierced with nails, and he has been hung on a cross. A crown of thorns has been placed upon his head, and a sign is above his head that reads, "King of the Jews," both the crown and the sign in derision. And yet the good thief says to Jesus, "You do have a kingdom. Remember me when you come into it." For the good thief, meanwhile, the circumstance of the cross is seemingly defining him as condemned, convicted, and punished for eternity. This is how he will be remembered. And yet Jesus says to him, "I see something else. I see that you are forgiven. I see that you are loved by God. You are free from the burden of your sin. You are no longer broken. And even this day, you will find bliss. You will be with me in paradise." Each man speaks words of kindness to the other. And this kindness of each man in seeing in the other circumstances beyond the current moment of crucifixion is why perhaps Jesus uses the word paradise in his assurance to the good thief. How strange it is that Jesus chooses this word. This is the only time in all of the Gospels we read the word paradise. The word we might expect Jesus to use is heaven. Jesus has taught about the kingdom of heaven, what it is like. He has said that the kingdom of heaven is like a pearl of great price or a mustard seed. And yet he doesn't assure the good thief entrance into the kingdom of heaven. Rather, he assures the good thief of paradise. Paradise is a word of Persian origin that means garden, or it can mean park or forest, any place on earth of lush green life. The translators of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek referred to the Garden of Eden as paradise. And in that garden, the scriptures tell us, there is a tree of life. In the moment of the crucifixion, Jesus is calling forth a vision of the original creation. Before sin, before violence and death enter the human experience, these two men are hanging on trees of death, and Jesus is inviting them to remember the tree of life and the paradise in which it is found. The paradise here on earth, the Garden of Eden in which everything in all of creation is deemed good by God. This is the bigger truth beyond the circumstances of crucifixion. Like Jesus, we too can hold a vision of what is good and true and holy, even in the hardest of times. And we can compassionately offer that vision to others with kindness. When there is cruelty on earth, when there is violence and war, when there is sorrow and suffering, when there is hunger and thirst, when illness besets humankind, and even when we face death, we can see with Jesus' vision beyond the current circumstance and trust in paradise, which is the central truth and intended state of all creation, here and now, today. And God will call it good. When we bleed, Jesus will bleed with us. When we hang on crosses, Jesus will hang with us. And yet Jesus will see us for who we are beyond the circumstance of the moment. And we will be in bliss with him. This offers hope for all of creation. Dear Jesus, remember each one of us today. Help us to see our place in your kingdom on earth, in paradise, as it is in heaven.